Moving within France is easier than moving to France, but it is still a challenge. It's full of its own processes and quirks, and it's all very uniquely French. So today we're going to tell you what actually works, what to avoid, and how to get settled in as quickly as possible, and some of what we learned along the way that will hopefully make sure you don't have to repeat our mistakes. You're welcome. Okay, so the first thing is if you don't have a big car or a van, then you're going to have to hire a mover, most likely, unless you just really don't have much stuff. Here in France, you have a few different options. You can use traditional moving companies, of course, and there are a lot of those listed on the directories, or one of these jobbing platforms like Yoojo. And that's what we use. We use them twice. It is sort of like a Craigslist or a Facebook marketplace where you basically post what you need and then people will bid on it, and you weed through the different responses and see what seems like a good fit for you. Now, none of this that I'm going to say today is sponsored or endorsed. We've paid for everything that we've actually used and no one's paying us to talk about it. But I thought it worked pretty well. I was happy with this platform when I discovered it. So you put up the details of the job onto their platform, where you're moving from, where you're moving to, what floor you're on, what the situation is in terms of stairs or elevators, that kind of thing, any other access issues, and then people pitch you. In our case, we had about 20 to 30 responses each time that we posted for the two different moves. And that was all just in the first day. There were some others that trickled in after that. And it was overwhelming in a good way because I saw that we had options. What we did is we took out the outliers, the extremely expensive ones, and then the extremely cheap ones that seemed too good to be true. And then we took all of those in the middle, and I copied everything this second time and dumped it into ChatGPT and said, help me sort this, help analyze this for me so that I could weed through it a little better. And I had my ideas of who seemed good, but we were looking for the right combination of equipment availability, experience with certified moves and verified reviews, and just the overall tone and vibe of the person. Now, one thing that surprised me the first time, and then it surprised me, although less the second time because I'd already been through this once, was that the person who showed up on the day was not the person who I'd booked. They were not the person I had been messaging with, and pretty early on, they want to trade WhatsApp. That's their preferred way to communicate, and WhatsApp is huge here in France and in Europe in general, so we've had to get used to using WhatsApp. Not that it's hard, but Americans don't really use WhatsApp very much. The morning of the move, in both cases, I got a message from the person I'd been talking to. In both cases, it was a guy. The guy messaged me and said, essentially, hey, by the way, I can't make it. My friend so-and-so is going to be there. And so you have people who run a moving operation as their small business, and they often have multiple trucks or vans and dollies and equipment. And they have a bunch of friends who work with them and help them to do these jobs. And we were actually really pleased with the results. The first time threw me off, but then it worked really well. So, I'm not mad at it. Everybody's got to earn a living, and as long as they do the job and they do it well, they don't break anything or damage the property that you're leaving or entering, it all worked out. So a couple of quick tips for you to help. As I said, first of all, don't automatically pick the cheapest quote. We filtered out the high and the low. And a pro tip is that I noticed in both cases, in both moves, when we posted our request, there were people who I had to read between the lines, and some of them would actually write in English because my post was translated from English into French and, automatically on the platform. And I translated the French responses as well. But there were several people who didn't actually have a truck, and we were very specific. I mean, this is one of the checkboxes of what's mandatory. And there were some people who basically were just responding to the ad to say, hi, I'm moving help. I'm a person who can move things and carry things, but they didn't come with equipment or a vehicle. And so that's not helpful, but they're just people out there trying to pick up some work. So pay a lot of attention to what people are offering and make sure you don't just book a person who doesn't have the truck or van that you need. That relates directly to the next tip, which is read their pitch very carefully. And again, in our case, we really focused in on their experience. And this particular platform verifies moves that have been done through that platform. And then there are public reviews. And there were quite a few people who pitched us that actually would have some good or okay reviews and then some really negative ones. So that was easy to strike those off the list. And I did a lot of that beforehand. But then again, the last tip that I would give on this is we dumped everything that looked promising into ChatGPT and let that tool help us weed through this. And it narrowed down really our top three. I asked it to give us our top three choices. And they were the people I had decided on my own. GPT was just sort of, verifying my take on things to make sure that I didn't miss anything, that there wasn't something they said that was a red flag that kind of sailed past me and my, low level of French. Next up is the absolutely necessary and decidedly unsexy part, which is setting up your utilities and administrative type accounts. Even if you're just moving across town, in France, it's basically a bureaucratic reset. You have to update your address everywhere, and you will have to deal with, of course, your employment and your bank, but you need to think about your phone bill. You're obviously going to set up electric accounts, water, gas if you have it, trash if it's not included in your rent. It happens to be included in our rent, so at least we didn't have to pay for that. That's part of our charges. One of the easiest things to update, which you should do right away, is your assurance habitation, which is your renter's insurance policy. Now, unless you're literally living in a hotel, you have to have this in France. So you have to have it for Airbnbs as well as a place where you've signed a longer term lease. In this video, I'm assuming that you're already in France and in the system somehow, so you should hopefully have your CAF account set up. You need to update your new address and the effective date of that move with Ameli as well, which is the healthcare system. And if you have any other insurances. Now, some of these things you can only do it online, some of them only by phone, and some, at least in our experience, are either only in person or it's a lot easier to do it in person versus trying to do it online because of all the documentation and verification you need to show or send and all the steps it would take. So for renter's insurance, for example, we used a company that we discovered when we rented our first long-term Airbnb, and it was about 10 minutes to sign up online. It was pretty easy. When we moved addresses, you have to tell them everything. Of course, you give them the address of where you're going, the size of the new place from the lease, how many floors, if there's a yard, if there's a garage, what kind of stairs or elevator or access situation it has, anything that might be considered a hazard. Like we have a toddler now, we had a baby when we moved. And so if you had a swimming pool, that's an issue. We don't have a swimming pool, but if you had something like that that could be considered a hazard, then that's something that they need to know. And one of my favorite parts about the site of the place that we used is that you were able to put the effective date in there for the change so that your coverage doesn't lapse. It literally flipped over on moving day, the day that we took possession of this place. I actually had it overlap because we took possession and then I had things coming in, orders and deliveries of furniture and whatnot, but we moved 5 days later. So we need both places covered, and that was pretty easy to do, actually. I figured that would be a nightmare that I might make a video about one day, but that part was actually pretty easy, so I can't complain. Setting up your home internet and changing your mobile plan billing over are trickier because those are tied to both the address on your ID as well as your physical address. When we set up our home internet, my residence card, of course, had our old address where we were living at the time, and I had that plus our lease that showed the place that we now live in, and it showed the date that this actually started. And so they accepted that because it was clear we were in the middle of moving. But later when we went to go add Susie's phone to a postpaid plan to add it to this account, we ran into a problem because her residence card, which she didn't get until after we'd already made this move, still has that old address. so it doesn't match the address we currently live in. So she still has a prepaid phone as of now. We have to get her residence card updated. And just getting the thing was such a process that we're really not in a giant hurry for her to surrender it and have to wait to get a replacement. So to be determined, but the prepaid plan really costs about the same as a postpaid plan. So it's more of the idea of just, feeling like everything is unified and on one set of billing instead of us having to go on and manually prepay her phone every month and remember to do that in time. So it's not a big deal, but we want to get it taken care of. But that's on the to-do list. That's on the doesn't have to be today list. And that list is pretty long, as is the to-do list for right now. So a pro tip when you're moving is plan on this phase that you could call an interregnum, where you are not fully settled in the new place and you still have ties to the old place. You're going to want to prepare a little folder, your very own little dossier that you carry around with you that proves everything. So you have your old address on your old bank statement, and if you've been able to, for instance, get your new bank statement and you have that, or you get the bank to print something for you if a new statement doesn't come in the mail or hasn't been created yet. But have this so that you can show it as needed and prove that yes, you're the same person and you lived here and now you live there. This will be very helpful. In terms of setting up electric accounts and water, there really is no single French experience here. It depends on where you live and what neighborhood you're in and what commune, what area you're in. That was the whole process, which doesn't deserve a video, but it would take a long video just to explain what we had to go through. But be prepared for some bureaucratic adventures just to get the lights on and the water flowing. So let's talk about furnishing your place, because this is where a lot of people, including us, underestimate the cost of things. Now, if you move into a fully furnished place, congratulations, but you're still going to want some basics, towels and bedding and probably some kitchen stuff. But if you move into an unfurnished place like we did, you're pretty much starting from zero. We were lucky that our place had a kitchen table and chairs, plus a full refrigerator and freezer, which is awesome, and a dishwasher. So in ovens, we didn't have to outfit the kitchen. The kitchen was pretty much well equipped, and we just brought in our other appliances like our air fryer and things. But in terms of other appliances and furnishing the other rooms that you live in our case, we had two big orders with Ikea. We spent about 4,000 euros at Ikea total for the bed and the couch and some cabinets and tons of kitchen gear, like all the plates and glasses and other things like that we needed, and cooking utensils, every pot and pan and everything that makes a house livable. We had to buy towels and bed sheets, pillows, you name it. We had to buy all that stuff. And we also spent around 2,000 euros at Darty, which is a really big appliance store. And that was basically for our washer and dryer. I love the washer and dryer that we got. They are the nicest ones I've owned as an adult, so I'm very happy to have them, and I'm even happier that my awesome mother-in-law gifted these to us as a housewarming gift. But we got great machines, so very happy with that. And I do want to mention, there's a clip on another video where I'm going through the frustrations I had with the IKEA deliveries, and I said I am never shopping at IKEA again. I am, as of now, inclined to never, ever, ever, ever buy anything from IKEA again. And, of course, we ended up back at IKEA. More than once, death taxes in IKEA, all are unavoidable. But besides IKEA, here's some of the other stores that you have in France specifically. I mentioned Darty, and there's also Boulanger, which is a big appliance chain. Both of those are big appliance and electronics stores. There's a store called, what I call it, Fnac, F-N-A-C, and I guess that's an acronym. I haven't looked, too many things to do, not enough hours in the day. But Fnac is more on the electronics and media side. They do have some appliances, and I understand that they're essentially a subsidiary or a sister company to Darty. And I noticed that some of their appliances are cheaper for something that seems equivalent. They have like an older years model, and also FNAC or Fnac does trade a lot of secondhand merchandise. So you can get reconditioned things that they give a warranty on, So it's almost like a used appliance dealership. I think people default to there when they're looking more for like a really good secondhand deal. In terms of furniture and decor, you have a lot of choices. This is France. Maison du Monde, Alinea, or a couple of them. And if you need sporting goods, sports equipment, and anything that you might find in the US, like a Big Ten Sports, there is a store called Decathlon, which is awesome. We love Decathlon. We wish Decathlon would sponsor us. We're not sporty enough to get a Decathlon sponsorship. We're going there tomorrow to buy winter boots for the whole family. So Decathlon's pretty great. A couple of points I want to highlight are, first of all, even if you don't need to buy a lot of stuff, every little purchase may seem reasonable, but this stuff adds up. So be really rigorous with your budget, especially if you're on a tighter budget, and make sure that you get the essentials you need first, and everything that seems like a good idea or is optional, that can wait. And in terms of delivery options, delivery costs can really rack up with Ikea specifically, which again, I talked about this in a previous video and ranted and raved. Ikea has these different tiers for delivery. There's the basic option where they quite literally just drop stuff at your curb. They take it off the truck and they set it on the curb. It doesn't matter if your door is 10 feet away, it's going on the curb. You pay more for them to take it to your door, and then you pay even more than that for them to actually bring it in. And then of course, beyond that, if you need something to be built, that is a separate cost, and they actually have a partnership with TaskRabbit where they book the person to assemble something for you. With one of our big deliveries where they had to make up bringing us the right bed after they sent the wrong bed that I spent hours assembling until I realized this is the wrong bed. When they brought the right bed, which was their mistake that they were correcting, the delivery was drop it at the curb. So me and my 57-year-old back by myself could not schlep all this stuff into the house very easily. So I asked the delivery guys, I had checked before they came, and I realized this was the case when I was looking at the order. I had a 20-euro bill in my wallet, and I thought, I'm going to see if these guys would like to make an easy 20 euros. And they were great. I asked them if they wouldn't mind taking the stuff in for me, and just said I didn't realize that I didn't have the right delivery given to me for this makeup order. They couldn't have been nicer. They took everything in, and they actually said, "Do you want us to unpack it and take the boxes away with us?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do. That would be awesome. Thank you." They did it in 5 minutes, the whole thing. So make sure you have a little cash just in case you need to tip somebody to help you out with a giant delivery. Okay, but enough retail talk. This is France, and you know what's really huge in France? Secondhand culture. So you have a lot of options for this. There's what is called the brocantes, which are the open-air flea markets. Now, different cities and towns and neighborhoods will do these. It's a really big community event. In our case here, even in our small city where we live in the suburbs of Paris, they block off several blocks in the downtown area, and it's lined with vendors. They also have what they call the vide-greniers, which is literally a empty your attic sale. That's more of the traditional yard sale from an American point of view, and those happen within neighborhoods. They're still very organized. There are also tons of online platforms where you can buy secondhand things and buy or sell. You can resell stuff or buy things. And I don't use Facebook. I have been off of Facebook since early 2020. Thank you very much. But Facebook Marketplace is actually massive here for furniture and other things like that. So if you're still in the grip of Facebook, you might want to check that out because it's very big here. And if you shop around and you go to the brocantes and the yard sales and the secondhand markets and you're online, you can probably save 30 or 40% at least off the cost of furnishing your new place. Next, let's talk about shipping things from abroad. So if you're moving from outside the EU and you're thinking of shipping your whole household, this is where French customs comes in. Now, disclaimer, again, I'm not a French customs lawyer or any kind of lawyer. This is not legal advice, but I'm going to tell you the basic pattern of the rules as they're currently written and as me and ChatGPT understand them. Do your own research on this. Follow your own instincts. But what I can tell you the current rules are, as of the moment I'm recording this, is that if you're transferring your primary residence to France from outside the EU. You can't be moving from Portugal or Spain or something. If you're outside the EU, you generally have to have lived outside the EU for at least 12 months. The things that you're shipping should have been in your personal use for at least 6 months prior to you moving them. They need to be things that are for personal use. These rules and tips do not apply to commercial items. And you usually have up to 12 months from the date that your residence officially begins in France to transfer things in duty-free. And as I understand it, this applies throughout the EU, although I'm sure every country has their own little twist. But those are the basics. So you need to provide a detailed itinerary of what you're shipping. You have to have proof that you have indeed lived outside the EU for 12 months. And proof that you now live in France. And of course, there's a very special customs form just for this process. So the simple rule of thumb is that if something looks new and is in original packaging or it has tags on it, France is most likely going to treat that as commercial. You know, they see that it potentially has resale value and they will charge you a duty on it as if it's new. So if your family or your friends want to send you gifts and packages, it's a lot simpler if they send you stuff that's used, personal items. Don't send some giant crate of brand new factory fresh items here and think you're going to get away with not paying customs on it, because I'm afraid that you most likely will. All right, now let's talk about the fun part, mistakes we made, things we got wrong, and ways that you can hopefully avoid doing that yourself. So first of all, like a lot of first-time parents, we bought and brought from China when we moved a ton of baby gear. Things that sounded like a great idea at the time, and then we never used quite a lot of it. And that's everything from like fancy bottle warmers. We never did warm milk. We always did, Susie temperature milk or just the room temp milk and formula. Otherwise, until she transitioned off of that. But all kinds of bath gadgets. There's this little shower stand that supposedly toddlers can use. And looking at it, and now that our daughter is the size and age where she's a toddler and we could maybe try to use it, I don't feel comfortable, with her like going into this donut and trusting her to hold on to these handlebars while we, hose her down with a shower head. I don't think that's going to ever get any use. So we have a lot of stuff that has gone into the, that was a good theory section of the house. Basically, the unfurnished guest room is the overflow junk room right now. In terms of the things that you buy that have to be delivered, I've already indicated that I've had some issues with Ikea, and I thought I planned it perfectly. We took possession of this house on a Friday. I had scheduled these 2 giant furniture deliveries and household goods deliveries for Saturday and Sunday, and the plan was that I would come over, receive those deliveries, get all that stuff set up, and do that 2 days while Susie was at home at the old place with the baby. And then on Monday was the moving truck going to the old place, and this place would meanwhile be fully set up. And then the internet installation was set for Tuesday. Well, that was the right plan, but as I mentioned before, Ikea sent the wrong bed, so that meant we had to sleep. We did have the mattress. We could, sleep on the mattress on the floor, which is surprisingly not very comfortable. In college, I had fond memories of this in my post-college years, but sleeping on the mattress on just the floor doesn't feel good at my age. But the internet installation was also quite an adventure. The guys were really great, and we have insanely awesome internet here. But our neighborhood had just been upgraded for the highest speed fiber optic internet, the 8 gigabit per second fiber optic internet. And it was, at the time, 2 gigabit per second was what it was rated for. We had ordered that amazing package of internet because, I'm doing YouTube videos, plus in my professional life, sometimes we send massive video files back and forth for, my filmmaking career. So it was great to realize that we were eligible for this, but we were apparently the first people on our block to actually get it. And so what that meant is that when the friendly technician showed up to take the router and things that I had brought home from Orange, which is where we got our internet from, and just, plug some things in and run some tests and do their activation magic between here and the home office or whatever, they realized that, oh yeah, the nearest access point for this new fiber is a block away. So the install guy had to do a bunch of things. He had to call the office, explain the situation. They had to call in the bucket truck, and the guy came out with the bucket truck. They had to spend hours running that fiber optic cable down the street, put it up on the poles, bring it into the house, and then install everything, and then all the testing and setup. It took basically an entire day. I thought it might take 2 hours. Meanwhile, poor Susie was back at the old place, and I had to leave her when we were cleaning. We were doing our wrap up and cleaning, and the baby was at daycare during the day, fortunately. But poor Susie had to clean most of our old place by herself, so I still owe her one for that, and I try to make it up whenever I can in little ways, but I know it was a hassle. Now this is the part where I'm going to make my friends in the US more than a little bit jealous. Let me tell you about our home internet and mobile phone situation, what we pay, what we get, and see how it stacks up to what you pay where you live. So we have, as I mentioned, 8 gigabit per second fiber optic internet in the house. The Wi-Fi speeds are usually about 1 gigabit per second download, so that's still pretty darn fast for Wi-Fi. We have both effectively unlimited. I have totally unlimited. Hers is effectively unlimited amount of data on our phones and calls and texts, more than any human could use. And we also have a 43-inch nice TV. It's not the most state-of-the-art, but it's the nicest TV we've had. We didn't have a TV before, so we got a TV. It was a special promo deal where we pay for it in installments at a negligible, almost non-existent interest rate as part of a promotion that we got it on with Orange. And all of that, our internet, our 2 phones, and paying for that TV until it's paid off, our total bill for all of this is about 107 euros a month. So depending on the exchange rate today as you're watching this versus today as I'm recording it, call that $120. I'm rounding up. I think it's around that. It's around $115, $120. So yeah, that's what we get for our money. Now here's what's really funny. Some of our French friends think that's expensive. Apparently Orange is the fancy or the expensive provider. There are a bunch of providers. I compared prices. We were with them before with the prepaid phone plans. And interesting sidebar, if you have a prepaid mobile phone account, you can transfer that number to any other vendor. It's just a lot of paperwork, and you have to go and prove things and show your address and whatnot. But, we had these phones now for about 1.5 years before we made the move to this house. So we were happy with the service, and I already have an account online with Orange, and I thought, let's simplify this process. And they had that amazing deal on the home internet package. So I was not in a rush to save 2 or 3 euros a month and move my whole life to another provider. But, your mileage may vary. You do you. Before we get to the moving checklist that I promised you in the description, I have one more very French surprise to tell you about, which is how French banks work. When you open an account at a French bank, you are not just opening your account at, say, BNP Paribas, where we have, or Societe Generale. You actually are tied to the specific local branch where you open the account. That becomes your home agency. So what this means in practice is that for a lot of things you might need to do, you actually have to go all the way back to that home agency where you created the account. In our case, that's across town in the 16th arrondissement. We live in the southeast suburbs. That is the southwest of Paris proper, where we used to live originally, very briefly. But the local branches of my bank, I can go in, I can do certain things. But if I was trying to do anything beyond just make a deposit or withdrawal above a threshold, if you want to do anything else, anything related to getting some kind of a loan or doing any kind of more complicated international business, I have to go to my home agency branch, and you can't just move it. So if you want to change that, you have to go into that agency, close the account and make any withdrawals or whatnot, or settle anything that's outstanding, and open a new account where you want it. And so it's not a huge day-to-day hassle, but it's a reality. It's just the way things work. So now, as promised, here is a handy moving checklist to help you keep track of all the things you need to think about, with a few of my tips sprinkled in along the way based on lived experience. Book your movers and confirm access in terms of, are there stairs, elevators? Is there a courtyard gate? What's the truck parking situation? You need to set up or transfer your utilities, so electricity, water, gas if you have it, your home internet. You need to order and schedule that internet and deal with your mobile plan. Allow more time than you think you need, and that really applies to most all of these points. But you should also plan your furnishing and appliance budget realistically. So make your rough budget. Check the stores like maybe Ikea or a big appliance store, but also look around secondhand. Use secondhand where it makes sense. There are lots of things that are great. You probably don't need a brand new dresser drawer. You can probably get a great one at a secondhand market, a yard sale of some kind. You're going to have to update your address literally everywhere that you have any kind of connection to France. So that's with CAF, with Ameli, your bank, your employer, any different insurances you have, anything tied to your ID, and also be ready to provide proof of your old and your new addresses for a while. Make yourself a little transitional folder, a interregnum dossier that will help you explain yourself and prove your situation. And you will need this even in some probably surprisingly unlikely circumstances, but it's really good to have that handy. If you're shipping, therefore importing anything from abroad, be sure to check the customs rules as they pertain to your situation. Make an inventory list of everything, and avoid shipping anything that still looks brand new or is a commercial item. And if that's something you have to do, be prepared to deal with the consequences. And if you're still unsure how things work, even after watching this video, plus everything else on YouTube you can find and going down Reddit rabbit holes and whatnot, you can ask us in the comments and we'll do our best to answer. Someone else who watches the channel might be able to offer you some tips based on their experience. You can join groups on Facebook. Hate to recommend Facebook, but apparently it's pretty useful for this sort of thing. And you can also ask ChatGPT. And remember that even good AI gets things wrong as confidently wrong as it gets things confidently right, but it can flatten the learning curve a bit. It can shave some of the raw discovery time off the process and help you at least get in the ballpark of the right idea, and then you can verify that yourself. And yes, as a former president used to say, trust but verify. So yeah, moving within France isn't exactly glamorous, but once you know the local quirks, it does become manageable. It's still stressful, but it doesn't have to be chaos. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you moved within France? If so, what surprised you the most? And what do you wish you had done in advance that you now know? And if you're planning a move and you have some questions about something that we didn't cover here, let us know that as well, and maybe we'll cover it in a future video. Next week's video is going to be all about settling in to your new home and your neighborhood, finding your pharmacy, your supermarket, dealing with daycare and school and your transit, all those sorts of things with a very specific French twist. And one last pro tip for you, don't forget, this is France. So when you're planning to do things or schedule deliveries, try to avoid between noon and 2 p.m. because that's when the delivery drivers are at lunch, and probably you should be too. If this was helpful to you, please hit like, subscribe, and if you want to watch more videos about the process of moving and getting settled into France, you can check those out on the playlist that we have linked right up here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.